Several years ago, I did an exam through the ACF, and one of the foundational recipes they required was the Muffin Method doing a banana bread. So I took it pretty seriously and considered all the different parts of the ingredients going into any muffin mix banana bread. The bananas obviously have to be incredibly ripe. If you leave them, cook them, strain them, and remove some of their water, it's going to affect the final batter. So a good ripe banana is key. The dry ingredients do not include the sugars, and you have to sift. That is where you begin adding air without creating a tough batter, because all you're doing is adding air. You haven't added moisture to the flour. So here are the bananas being mushed up. You can tell they're not releasing any water, but I'm going to use them right away, and they're a beautiful bright color. Now, I could mix all of the wet ingredients together, including the fat, which is oil, the egg, and other things, but I'm going to leave them separate and show you how I loosen the bananas so that you can see how they affect the overall batter. I like to toast my pecans pretty dark before they go into the batter, and I do this ahead of time so that they can cool completely, and they taste great that way. This particular banana bread is going to have a frosting at the end, so I'm not going to add a topping. Now, I happen to not film the original mix method. I accidentally didn't turn on my computer, so I had to go out and buy bananas that were not ripe. These are not uber ripe bananas, so I baked them in the oven at 350 until they were black, and then I peeled them, and I left them in the cooler overnight, and they did strain some moisture and oxidize, so that's what they ended up looking like. Okay, but they still taste fine. But just so you know, that's what happens when you store bananas in the refrigerator overnight. They lose moisture and they darken. So as I add these wet ingredients, again, I could mix them all together, but too far in advance, and you might pre-coagulate or burn the eggs, especially with the sugar and the lemon juice. But you can see it lightening. Now, I am not over mixing at this point because the only time you can over mix something is when it has gluten present, all right? So as I add the dry ingredients, I'm adding things that are affected by the moisture in the eggs, the moisture in the banana, the lemon juice, whatever you're adding, it's going to connect to the ingredients in the dry products. For the flour, it's going to start to hydrate the gluten proteins, which are going to then start to connect, and that's what can make them tough. But it's also going to start to ignite the baking soda and baking powder and create CO2 immediately. So this is your go time. You don't want to leave this stuff sitting in the bowl any longer than you have to. Don't leave it. Don't take a break. It's go time. Now, I added the pecans to the third addition of the dry ingredients so that I don't overmix. And the goal is to leave some flour, to leave some streaks, because if you haven't, you have overmixed it. Now, I use a scoop. That's what the original batter looked like. It's a lot lighter and more fluid. Using any kind of pan is up to you. You're going to want to spray it. If you're putting these in muffin tins, spray the tins, but if you use liners, don't spray the liners. That's counterintuitive and unnecessary. Now you can see what a nice spread this is. This is not a cake batter muffin. This is a true muffin. So it's going to have a nice flow to it, and it's not going to act like a cake batter does. That's why we use the muffin method. Basically, you're separating the dries from the wets because the minute you combine them, you start to get a reaction. And that's why you don't need a mixer. And that's why these kinds of recipes can be mixed up in under 5 minutes. So you don't mix the batter the day ahead and leave it in the refrigerator overnight and lose all the precious CO2 that you need to make your muffins rise.